Hi, you're listening to Photofocus. This is the July 5th edition, and joining me this week is special guest Jeff Revell.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Good. And we also have our regular host, Scott Bourne.
Co-host, buddy. Call me a co-host. You're the host.
That's fine. There's our co-host, Scott Bourne.
I have to give deference where it's due. You're the big kahuna now.
Oh, something like that. Well, let's get people just a quick chance to get to know everybody who's here. It's been a little while since we've had three folks on the show at once. Scott, give people just a quick background on what you do.
I run Photofocus.com. I have been a professional photographer for most of my life. I primarily focus my photographic efforts on two very disparate groups of things: cars and wildlife.
Things that go fast and things that like it quiet. And Jeff, give folks a little bit about your background. You have a diverse background in photography as well.
Yeah, I've been shooting like Scott for pretty much most of my adult life, and I also I'm an author. I've written multiple books for Peach Pit, and mostly based on equipment, so that I like to help other people actually kind of learn how to use their gear and make better photographs. So I've been working on that venture for about 3 years now.
And that's the From Snapshots to Great Shots series. And you've written both Nikon and Canon gear. Any other camera models that you've tackled?
No, just, those are the big two. And, it seems to be that's where, most of the public kind of lays their allegiance. So that's kind of what we like to stick with.
Good. Well, let's actually start on a good, easy topic here, and we'll jump off with exposure. And I've been talking with a lot of folks, and I think that this is one of those areas that as people migrate from being a beginner to wanting to take their photography more seriously is really wrapping their head around exposure. Scott, why don't we kick off with you? What do you see are some of the biggest hurdles to going in and starting to shoot in something other than a completely automated mode?
I think people get too wrapped up in trying to do everything too soon. I try to get people to move from automatic to aperture priority, and rather than jumping into full manual, because it's a baby step. And then you're setting the most creative part of the picture taking process, the depth of field. The aperture controls the near to far that's in focus, and you set that, and then the camera automatically sets a shutter speed. So my recommendation is start out by using one of the semi-automatic modes like aperture priority. And I've been doing this a long dang time, and I still shoot aperture priority probably 85% of the time. There's some situations where I go into manual to do special things, but I'm mostly interested in controlling my aperture. And unless I move into a situation where I'm shooting high speed stuff, then I go to shutter priority. But the other thing I'd also mention is part of exposure is understanding, that you've got to have good white balance to get a good exposure. And learning how to set your camera's white balance is a good thing. And if you don't take time to read the manual, then you need to have one of Jeff's books for your camera, and I'm sure he goes into white balance in depth in those books.
Well, I actually just got done recommending the Snapshot series. I was interfacing with some people who were newer to photography, whose exact feelings were, okay, I want to move beyond my point and shoot, but they were intimidated. And I think, Jeff, one of the things you do nicely in the book series is you focus on results. It's a very rich approach with lots of imagery to help people sort of look at what they're trying to achieve, see good results, and then even side by side. With the topic of exposure, what are some of the most important lessons you've learned that you try to pass on to some of your students?
Well, the big thing is, everybody wants to do everything all at once. They want, great looking photos right out of the box. And they think that, switching their gear, going to a professional type camera is really going to do that for them. And so it's really, for me, it's helping them understand that, photography is a process. And you have to take the steps. You can't just jump from one piece of gear to another and think that you're just automatically going to get better photographs. You have to know, what everything does in that camera, why you would want to choose aperture priority, as Scott was, saying, which is also my favorite setting. But why you'd want to choose that, or why you'd want to go to shutter priority, or why, on some occasions you might actually have to or want to use manual. So for me, it's actually getting them to understand that, there's the gear, but then there's understanding how it works. And And as you know, I'd like to tell people, you've got a manual, and it's something that you should always fall back on for the technical information. That's going to tell you exactly what the button does. It doesn't tell you when to use it necessarily, and that's what you need to understand is when to apply the technology and how to apply it to get the effect that you're looking for. And I think that's the big thing is people kind of know what look they want, but they just don't know how to get there. So that's really what I try to help them is to understand, the different settings, how they affect the photographs that they take, and then when they want to apply them.
Well, I think one of the things I've encountered in talking with folks as they're looking to make that move from being competent with their camera to really feeling like they know it, I think it often comes down to people saying, yeah, but do I have to read the manual or do I have to read a book? I'm pleasantly shocked at the number of people who are starving for new knowledge but don't want to actually put the work in. So how much of this stuff is camera specific and how much of it is just general photographic knowledge? Scott, let's start with you on that. One of the things that I've noticed is that anytime I pick up a new camera, there's a certain learning curve, getting comfortable and knowing where each control is or discovering some newer controls that as I move up through cameras and start to gain more power. But once you learn this stuff, is it really a foundation forever?
Well, I don't know how many books Jeff's written. I've written 5, and I try to stick with concepts in my books. I want to teach concepts because if you can learn the concepts of the exposure triangle, for instance, you can apply it to any camera. So that helps. But I actually think you mentioned something there, Rich, that just gave me an idea. Is part of the problem is everybody's constantly upgrading their camera. So everyone thinks they've got, I got the 7D, that's great. Oh, the 8D's coming out, I got to have that. They can't articulate any reason why. They just think they have to have the new one. They're comfortable with the 7D, then all of a sudden they switch to the 8D, they move the buttons around, and they can't figure out how to use it. I'll give you a perfect case in point. I bought the D3 and the D3S. I loved them, and I have several of them. Then the D4 came out, and Nikon completely reconfigured all the buttons and menus and stuff. And I took one to Alaska to photograph eagles, and I missed 1 billion shots because I'm just so used to the D3S. The buttons weren't where they were supposed to be, and I was in a kerfuffle. So sometimes I think just upgrade mania can be your enemy. Learn your camera, and shoot, if you got a camera that's even 5 years old that's taking great pictures, I think at some point in time, upgrade mania gets in the way. That's just my opinion.
Well, Jeff, what do you think? I actually saw you recently did a blog post somewhat on this topic about when to get a new camera. Do you think people are sometimes rushing? I'm actually more prone to buy a new lens before I am to buy a new body. And I think a lot of people forget that it's often the glass part that's making a bigger difference.
Yeah, that's a really good point because that's really what I push when people ask me, and I'm sure they ask you and they ask Scott, well, what camera should I buy? And I'm thinking, the real important thing is, first of all, you're going to be married to this system, hopefully for a really long time. And then secondly, the real investment that they're going to make over the period of their photographic life is in lenses, hopefully. They're going to buy great glass that transcends one camera body to a next. And, as far as the actual, ability to take great photographs and learning the principles, just the fact that I jumped from Canon to Nikon and back to Canon and back to Nikon again, it kind of just really shows that, if you know what the principles, what the basic concepts are, like Scott was saying, if you learn the concepts, moving from one camera to another is really not that hard. Once you kind of know where the buttons are, the principles of photography, and you can apply those tools then. So I do find people actually do, and I've had that because I've written books for like the T1i, the T2i, the T3i, and I've had people that have upgraded from one to the next to the next. and if you look at the features of the cameras, they've added a couple of little features here and there. There's really, there's no big boost in resolution or anything else. It's the next one, and some people just have to have that next one. And I think they're always going to be like that.
Well, to that point, I think a lot of our listeners forget that camera manufacturers are in the business of selling camera bodies and lenses. And just like there's a new car model each year, it doesn't mean that there's actually anything that much different. It's just, hey, it's a new year. We have to release a new body. It's kind of the game, isn't it?
Yeah, but there's people who actually go out and buy new cars and do leases every year or 2 years too, just because they want something new and fresh. So I think it kind of crosses those lines as well. You find the same behaviors.
All right. Well, let's put that aside then. If glass is where it's at, Scott, what do you think are the 3 lenses that you would put in your bag? If you were only able to take 3 lenses on a trip, what would you take?
Well, I just want to go backwards 1 second and say that I published 400 photographs from my original Canon D30, which I bought in the year 2000, I think,
Yeah.
12 years ago.
And it still works, right?
3.3 megapixel camera.
I don't know. With that few megapixels, people might think you're not a pro.
Yeah, that's it. That's what and what people think is all that I'm worried about. Okay. As for the 3 lenses I would have, if I were a Canon or a Nikon shooter, that's pretty easy. The 24 to 70 2.8, the 70 to 200 2.8, and then your third lens is a variable depending on which your specialty is. If you're a macro shooter, I'd throw a macro in. If you're a sports and wildlife photographer, a race car driver, a race car photographer like me, I'd throw a long telephoto in the 5 to 800 range. If you're doing architectural work, I might throw in a super wide rectilinear lens. So that third one's a variable tied to whatever your specialty is. But a fast 2.8, 24 to 70, and 70 to 200 in the Nikon or Canon range, that'll cover a very large percentage of what most of our audience is going to listen, what our listeners are going to shoot.
Well, I think a lot of folks get hung up and they get so concerned about getting, a broader depth of field in the number of lenses that they have that they often lose track of just how important the speed of that lens is and the quality of the glass. Jeff, what are some of your favorite lenses or the lenses that you'll take on every shoot?
Well, actually, this is kind of one of those it depends answers, because it depends on if I'm shooting full frame or if I'm shooting in like a APS-C or a DX mode. Because depending on the body I'm carrying, it has a lot of, it basically depends on the lens I'm going to take. If I'm using my full frame, like if I'm shooting with my D800, I love my 14 to 24. I love my 7200. And I've got a 24 to 70, and they're all f2.8 lenses, and they're all beautiful, and they do some fantastic work. But if I'm shooting with like my D7000, and one of my favorite lenses is the 18 to 200. I love that lens. It's just
I have that because Scott told me about it, and I got that exact same combination. I love that lens for when I'm on vacation.
Yeah, it's a great travel lens. I mean, another one that I would really recommend is either if you have the APS-C or the DX, maybe a 35, a large aperture 35, or like the 51.4 if you're shooting full frame. It's a little old school, but I think everybody should at least own one prime lens, just because there's really nothing like a prime. I mean, you just get a different look to it. So,
well, I do want to throw in here that if you're shooting in the Micro Four Thirds category, which by the way in Asia is now half the market.
Wow.
50% of the cameras sold in Asia are now mirrorless.
Yeah, I just got the brand new Sony N to play with that I'm doing a review on, and I was working with the NEX7 a couple of weeks ago, and I have to admit there's something cool about the camera system. It's different, but it's I don't know how do I put it. It's nice that it's so small. There's times I'm like, wow, all this power and no weight.
Well, I'll tell you, there are 2 lenses in that scenario that I would absolutely have. They're both primes. One is the Olympus Zuiko 12 millimeter f2 and the Olympus 45 Zuiko 45 millimeter f1.8. Those 2 lenses are stunning. I mean, mind-blowingly stunning. The 12 becomes an effective focal length of a 24 f2. It's unbelievably sharp. It's the most expensive Micro Four Thirds lens I've seen at $699, but it weighs like an ounce. And then the 45 becomes an effective focal length of a 90 millimeter 1.8. Now, a 90 millimeter 1.8 on a Canon or a Nikon would cost $2,500 and weigh a ton. But on the Micro Four Thirds system, it weighs like an ounce and is $400. And unbelievable. So, I mean, it really just depends on, like Jeff said, it really does. It is a depends kind of thing. I mean, and I'm not talking about the underwear.
Well, on that, I was actually having this very conversation with a friend, and she was saying, okay, I've got several family trips coming up. I'm ready to bite the bullet. I want to buy into a camera system. I'm ready to get something really good. And I said, well, what's your budget? She's like, I'd like to spend about $1,000. And I'm like, okay, thinking to myself. And I suggested some of the Micro Four Thirds. I suggested some of the stuff from Olympus. And she said, no, I need a DSLR. Let's just take this one last point before a commercial break. I think that a DSLR versus a Micro Four Thirds system, that there are strengths and benefits, but why give a Micro Four Thirds system a second look? Jeff, have you had a chance to play with these at all? Do you have any opinions about this type of camera system?
I've actually seen. I haven't seen a lot of them. I've taken a look at the Nikon line, which is the Nikon 1 series, and it's the thing for me is if I have a camera, I have to have an electronic viewfinder. I can't do the LCD on the back for all of my photography, just because shooting in different situations and in bright lights and things like that. I really find that I want to put my eye to the camera because it just it just makes me more connected and it gives me a better view. So, but they, a lot of the Micro Four Thirds actually have viewfinders and they have electronic viewfinders. And to that extent, having a small camera that you can take a lot more places because, you dangle a big DSLR around your neck for a while, it's a brick. I mean, it gets tiring. So having something that gives you that
It's
quality,
also a cop magnet.
Yeah, well, that's true too.
You must be a terrorist because
That's
you
right.
have a DSLR.
As opposed to something that you stick on a little bendy tripod and can get the same quality photographs. So, but I have used them, and I'll tell you, I was at the last Photoshop World, and Vincent Versace sat down next to me, and he pulled out a Nikon 1 out of his pocket, and he said, "This is the best camera ever." Now, that to me is a pretty good endorsement coming from my buddy Vinny. So.
Yeah, I think Micro Four Thirds is worth a look for a lot of reasons. Number one, lightweight, like we just said. If you get into your upper 50s, and I won't mention which of the three of us is there, but his initials are Scott Bourne. I'm on the wrong side of 55, and I'll tell you right now, after decades of lugging around all these heavy DSLRs and 800 millimeter lenses, it has taken a toll on me. And to be able to sport something like an Olympus EP3 or even the new OMD, which I got, it's a joy. And the image quality is almost right there with the DSLRs. But the other thing is, and this is the most compelling reason, is you can afford the fast glass for these cameras a lot easier than you can for the DSLRs. I did a price comparison, and to get a f2 24 millimeter lens and an f1.8 90 millimeter lens in Canon or Nikon, as close as you can get, which would be the 85-1.4 and the 85-1.2 in the Canon, you're talking about spending roughly 3 to 4 times the money to get the same lens quality. So that's a big difference right there. You can get super fast glass much more affordably, and it's much lighter. Those are the two reasons. That's the two arguments. And maybe the third one is that's the way the world's going. I mean, like I say, Asia, 50% of the cameras sold are mirrorless. Micro Four Thirds is the biggest part of that. And you can interchange lenses between brands. Now, unfortunately, not as the whole Micro Four Thirds thing didn't take off the way everybody initially signed off on it. But you can get Panasonic lenses and some other lenses with adapters that work. So you're not necessarily locked in to your brand's lenses.
And I was playing with a new Lens Baby adapter that was allowing me to take Nikon primes and put them onto a Sony body. That they actually have a Lens Baby adapter that can use Nikon prime lenses and open that up as well for people if you've already got an investment, which is kind of cool. Actually, on the lenses front, Scott, we have a show sponsor that makes it really easy for people to try out different gear.
BorrowLenses.com. You can go to the Photofocus.com homepage, and you'll see the BorrowLenses.com banner. Click on that. It'll take you right over to BorrowLenses.com, or you can just go there yourself, type it in. They have every lens we've discussed today for rent, and every body and every tripod and every video camera, even a red. They've got everything. They've got stuff you've never heard of. They have every single lens, I believe, that's for sale today, with the exception of the kit lenses that come with the inexpensive DSLR systems, because everybody's already got those. But they got everything else, and they got dozens of them. So check them out, barlenses.com. I also want to take this moment to mention that if you want to buy a lens and you click on the Amazon banner on the Photofocus homepage, that helps us out here. You don't pay anything more than you'd pay if you went to Amazon direct to buy the lens, but we get a little thank you from Amazon, and we appreciate their support of the Photofocus blog and podcast.
Great. Well, let's switch gears for a second and talk a little bit about processing images. There's a lot of folks are in the market for new computers, and there's two pieces of technology that have been coming out more and more that are both related to how the images look on your computer. And that is the Retina display, and the flip side of that is we're starting to see a lot of PCs doing things like, for example, HP with DreamColor, allowing us to have 10-bit displays for more accurate color and even have it load color profiles like Adobe RGB. Let's start on the Mac side with the Retina display. Apple recently announced new computers with these very high-resolution displays, and already there's been some confusion. People are like, wait a minute, why do I not get that full number? And it turns out that they're, essentially packing more pixels into the screen. I've also been reading some reports that the graphics card that they're using to drive that seems to be completely maxed out, that when running at that high resolution, you are, that the machine is getting very warm, that it's working, and but they couldn't get any more performance out of it, that we're seeing things like the frame rate for the computer and like some of the, when you're playing back video or user interface elements, that it's dropping down to 20 frames a second. What are we going for here? Did any of you order one? I'm still waiting for mine to arrive. Did you give in, Jeff?
Well, I've actually made several trips to the Apple Store, and not necessarily to buy, but because we were there, and so I've had a chance to kind of oogle the new ones. I tell you that to me the real draw is not the display, because to tell you the truth, I can't tell the difference. I really cannot tell the difference between the Retina display, and it's the same thing on the iPad. I look at an iPad 2 and an iPad 3. I can't really tell that much difference between the two displays. And maybe it's just because, my eyes are getting bad or whatever it is. But to me, it was more of the performance issue. I'm looking at it more from a performance standpoint, because I am shooting with the D800 and things like that, that I'm looking for something that can really handle images. Now, I will tell you that the higher resolution display is kind of nice, because I don't think you get as much pop from a really high res, from a 36 megapixel image on a 1900 resolution display. But that aside, the thing is, it's kind of, you have to balance it out. I think you have to look at, okay, what am I gaining in performance and what am I willing to give up in dollars, because it doesn't come cheap. That's the one thing about this technology.
Scott, you've been thinking about it. I've been thinking about it. I ordered mine. I gave in because I needed a new Mac laptop for the office anyway. So I was like, well, let's just take the gamble. The apps aren't really supporting it yet. We do have that in Aperture. We have Adobe committing that Photoshop will be there pretty quick. What do you think? Is this marketing talk, or is this actually going to make a difference for folks?
So here's the deal. Everybody that knows me knows that with every new Mac laptop, there's just an automatic trip for Scott to the Apple Store and a new Mac laptop. But not this time. I had my cart fully loaded with a fully configured one at $4,800.
Yeah.
And I said, what the hell am I thinking? I just bought new computers in December. I'm very happy with my maxed out MacBook Air. I bought the most expensive MacBook Air you can get. It performs extraordinarily well. It's very lightweight. I see no reason to change it. There are some things that I do not like about the new computer. There's no FireWire port. Yes, there'll be an adapter, but there isn't one today. And that if come thing, I learned way back in the days of the Osborne computer to be worried about that if come thing, where the first documented case of vaporware occurred. I'm also a bit tired of Apple's routine of, evangelizing things, and then a year later saying, "What do you mean FireWire is good? We never said the word FireWire ever. FireWire, you can't find the word FireWire on our website. We don't do anything with FireWire. There's not a FireWire port on this computer, folks. How many of us have FireWire drives? Raise your hand." That's the sound of a billion people raising their hand. You can't use it. The other thing is the Retina display is only optimized currently for Aperture and Safari. If you use Adobe products, it's a coming. Is that 3 weeks from now, Rich? Is that 3 months from now, Rich? Is that 9 months from now, Rich?
Well, what I did get out of him for those people who are saying, "Hey, I've already bought the laptop. When am I going to have my Adobe apps?" Adobe has publicly committed that Photoshop will be the first app, and they're already working on it, which is good. But in typical Apple fashion, it's not like they gave their partners a lot of advanced knowledge and said, "Oh, while you're redesigning for the next version, why don't you also think about going up to this resolution?" Even though we don't have computers yet, it was kind of a surprise to folks. So they're getting there, but yeah.
But it's not available now. That's my point. So you can't run Photoshop, you can't run Lightroom, you can't run anything but Aperture or Safari. None of the browsers currently
you could run them, you just won't get any advantage.
Yeah, that's my point. Sorry, I should be more accurate. It's you can run them, but you can't see any advantage. So I'm thinking like, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to sit this round out, and I'm going to let all the people, the early adopters, go through the pain and agony, and then on the second one that comes out, I'm probably a buyer because by then everything will be optimized to work with it. They'll have solved the graphics card issue, etc. But I think that I've been burned too many times by Apple saying, you need a micro floppy drive, and then there's no such thing as micro floppies anymore.
Can I tell you about my Express 32 card adapter in the side of my MacBook Pro?
Yes.
I'm staring at it right now, and I don't think I've ever had anything stuck in there before. So
do not pay attention to that man behind the curtain. I think we've been down this road too many times. I'm going to wait and see. I almost wonder, guys, if we don't have a situation where they solved a problem that didn't exist. I mean, who was out there clamoring for?
Well, there was a lot. As soon as they started putting them on the iPads, everyone started asking for them on the computers. I mean, it is marketing talk.
I never heard
those interweb forums that you avoid because everybody just yells. Scott, those people were doing it, but that doesn't make it right.
They don't count. The guys, anybody whose nickname is Star Wars 189 is not. I'm not making marketing decisions based on him. He's 12 years old. He lives in his mom's basement. He eats Cheetos 3 times a day, and he's never going to get a job. So who cares what he thinks?
Yeah, well, remember the visionary person of the company has left the building. One of the pieces of tech, though, that is in there and that other manufacturers are doing as well is this IPS technology, which basically means that if you're looking at an LCD or you're looking at a laptop or computer display, the big importance here, if you're out there shopping, is how it looks at different angles. So don't just stand in front of the display. A good display these days should look equally bright from pretty much any angle other than you're standing behind it. So they'll sort of say, oh, it has a 178-degree field of view, which basically means as long as you're not standing right next to it or behind it, you could see the same brightness of an image. So that's good to look for. But have any of you had a chance to play with the 10-bit displays or the DreamColor displays that actually have color profiles?
I haven't. I've not been privileged to take a tour of HP like somebody whose initials are Richard Harrington. So,
no, I haven't seen a thing about them either. So you're the solo man on this one.
All right. Well, I'm evangelizing this tech because I love it so much. It's a 10-bit display, so you get greater color accuracy, and it's also has color profiles. So it has both video profiles that I use, and it has like Adobe RGB and sRGB built in, so you could just switch your monitor to that, and it's a hardware calibration. So it's pre-calibrated monitors with the profiles built in. So when you are working and you want to say, oh, well, show me that in native Adobe space, I'm working to color grade or color correct with that, boom, the monitor snaps right to it. It's kind of impressive to have.
Is this stuff shipping yet?
It's been shipping for 2 years.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it right now. It's out there, but it's not cheap either.
It's not cheap.
I don't care what it
neither
costs.
is a Retina display either. It's
Okay.
about comparable to that.
Some people actually care what it costs, Scott.
I know. But
no,
see, my job is to get the thing that's unattainable so everybody else can dream about it.
Well, it's made for you then because it's about $2,500 for a 24-inch display, I think. But Hey, Rich, let me ask you a question. How are they driving this? Does this run off a standard video card, or do you need special video cards to drive a 10-bit display?
No, a standard. So here's the funny thing on that, right? All the NVIDIA cards, like the same type of NVIDIA cards that come in a Mac, NVIDIA has 10-bit drivers, except
Wow.
Apple refuses to use them. And so the same graphics cards we have are capable on a Mac of doing 10-bit displays. I don't know if they're going to roll it into Mountain Lion, but up till now, they've chosen not to unlock it. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Okay, so here's the thing. I've already disengaged from Aperture to Lightroom, which caused a couple of planetary shifts in our star system. I might as well cause the complete black hole wormhole event and switch to Windows.
well, we'll see with Windows 8. Jeff, you're cross-platform, aren't you?
Yeah, I am actually. I kind of have to be because because I've done several software books too. So you really don't have a choice when you're when you're working with the doing software instruction that you have to address. And let's face it, I love my Mac, but there's a lot more Windows users out there than there are Mac users.
So on this front, and actually, Scott, this is a good chance for us. We've got somebody on the show who's a very good Lightroom user, knows his stuff. Scott and I have both recently decided to switch, and this is where some of our audience members are now groaning. But let's keep this positive. And what are some things that you have discovered about the latest version of Lightroom that you really like? What are some of your favorite new features that we should make sure we don't miss, or you really think are just great tools that are going to help the average photographer?
Actually, this is really great, and I am. I'm a Lightroom advocate. I love this program. To me, it's given such great creative tools to the common man who's just scared stiff of Photoshop. But it's really easy to move around this program. So here's a couple of things I really love about what they've done here. The first one is if you go into the develop module and you go into the brushes, there's so much more you can do with the brushes now, with the adjustment brushes, because you can actually adjust sharpness in specific areas. You can actually go in and do color temperature in specific areas. You've got so much more control with those brushes, and sometimes it's just an amazing thing to go in and play with these things, because it's instead of doing all these global changes, you can do really minor, really small things that really will improve an image. So I love the brushes.
And that's one of the things that people always thought you had to go to Photoshop for if you wanted to make a isolated adjustment, but now you can do it in Lightroom.
Absolutely. Also, the new engine that they're using, the new ACR engine, which is an Adobe Camera Raw, and it's just basically the same raw processing engine that you have here. But they went through and they redid the math on most of their sliders here. So things like the highlights and the shadows, which they've changed the name. It used to be Fill Light, and I think I can't remember what the other one was. I haven't used Lightroom 3 in so long, but they've readjusted those so that the results you get are they're much more realistic. It's you're really pulling in. It's like you're really working with the data from the image now, and not just applying some oversaturated adjustment to your image using a slider.
Do you have the same lust feelings that Scott and I have for the clarity slider?
Oh, I'm a clarity freak. They really, that's my downfall, is when I have to really watch myself on the clarity slider, because if it were up to me all the time, I'd have it thing pegged to 100 every single time.
Yeah, there's two things I overuse in Camera Raw. One is clarity, and the other is post crop vignette.
I love them both. But the other great thing they did here, and that's kind of, I'm glad you brought that up, because you notice that now a lot of these sliders have negative values. Instead of just sliding the clarity to the right, now you can go to the left. So you can do things like soften using the clarity slider.
Yes, that's one of my favorite things right there.
Yeah, so they've really taken the time to do some really nice things with this. And I tell you, there's one thing I can't stand, and there's one thing I really love. The one thing I can't stand is the map feature. I think it's just bloat. I don't know why they put it in there. I mean, it's kind of like has a cool factor for about 5 minutes, and then you're never going to touch it again, pretty much, unless you're one of those people that really has to organize your photographs by geolocation, which I don't know a lot of people that do that. But the one thing I really love that they added was the book feature. The books in this thing are amazingly simple to use, and the results are fantastic. And I don't know if you've made any books from it yet, but I've had a couple of books that I created in using this because I used to do everything, and I used to take all my photos and then I would go to iPhoto to do my books. And I find that I don't need to do that anymore because the book feature in here, they teamed up with Blurb, I guess so is who it was. And
Yeah.
they did an amazing job of really, allowing people to make some fantastic looking books with the software without having to actually leave the software, which is what I really love.
Scott, what do you think? Any as you continue your exploration in it, any features stand out, or anything to ask Jeff since we've been wanting to get an Aperture, help the Aperture users out there understand some new options.
Well, I think he covered it, but I will just say that here's the thing that broke the camel's back for me, the straw that broke the camel's back. I took some images from a 5D Mark III, and I imported them into the latest Adobe Camera Raw, and I imported them into the latest Apple RAW converter. And it's not even close. The Adobe Camera Raw images were cleaner, period. End of discussion. Nothing to talk about. Nothing to wonder about. It is absolutely better. Apple has not kept up for years and years and years, like 5 years. Here's the way I would always talk about this. They both do great conversions. They're just different. I would say one is not better than the other. They're just different. But now I'm saying ACR is better at converting raw files, gives you more options, and it's cleaner. And that alone works for me. Now, I will admit that I wish Lightroom had a managed library option like Aperture. I still miss that. I still struggle a little bit when putting photos in the wrong place. It's not as easy to merge libraries, catalogs, etc. I've kind of come down to the conclusion that for me the best way to do it is to do each job I shoot as a separate catalog. That's where I've sort of come out on this thing.
And Jeff, you have a lot of projects where you're doing both shooting for work and shooting for personal. And I know you travel a lot. Do you have any practical advice about, handling the fact that you're in the field and then you get back home with different jobs and projects? How are you tackling your library?
I understand where Scott's coming from because especially when you shoot a lot of photographs, it's really tough. I know people who do exactly what you're talking about, Scott, which is they create catalogs for everything they do, especially people who shoot weddings and things like that because they just don't want to mix things up. And it helps your workflow go faster. The less number of images you actually have in a catalog, the faster you're going to work. I'll tell you the way I do it, and I'm kind of one of those people that I kind of every year I create a new catalog, and I love keywords. I'm a keyword guy. I keyword almost every single photograph I put in because I don't care where it sticks it. I just use the date option when I import, and then I just let it go where it goes because it keeps my photographs for me. I always make a backup as I import, so it keeps my photographs. I don't care where they live because I'm only working with them in Lightroom anyway. But I always want to know how to find them, and to that extent, I keyword everything. I've got keywords that like say cherry blossoms or Chinatown or Death Valley or whatever it's going to be. I have one for my kids' names and things like that. So I'm one click away from finding the photographs that I want. And for me, that's just the easiest way to manage the stuff that I do. And I'm also really big into creating not just that, but creating different collections. Because collections for me are a really powerful way of organizing photographs as I'm working on a project. Not necessarily, where I'm going to stick everything as I'm importing it, but as I'm working on projects, like if I'm collecting photographs that I'm going to use in a book, I'll create a collection for that book, and I'll use a smart collection. So I'll assign a color to a photograph, and if I see what I want to use for the book, I'll hit 7 for I think that's yellow. And as I hit the number 7 key, it automatically adds it to that collection. So I can go back, just pop that collection open, and here's all the photographs I want. So I use the collections to help organize for projects. I use keywords just to keep myself organized on a daily basis, though.
Okay, I think that's some good advice, some useful tips. I've definitely started playing with collections more myself, and what I like too is that they can actually go between Adobe apps. So if you're in Bridge or you need to hand off or you're going to some other tools like page layout, you've got the ability for collections to go with. Scott, let's take another quick time to mention some of our sponsors. If you've gone through and you've taken great photos, you've developed them, and you want to share them, do you have any advice for our listeners?
Yeah, I've got two places you can do that. One of them will help you do contests with them, and the other one will help you sell them. SmugMug is the place to go if you want to sell your photographs. They have an incredible system that helps you from start to finish. All you've got to do is upload a picture, and then if people want to buy it, they can pay you on SmugMug. SmugMug can get the photograph printed, framed, and shipped for you. You never have to touch it. They also host video better than anybody, in my personal opinion. I've been using them to host video for 4 years, long before they were a sponsor of this show. They were the place we hosted all the videos for the show. They're the place that we host the videos now when you do them for us, Rich. It's a great organization for photographers by photographers. Also want to mention viewbug.com, where just go to Google right now. Pause the podcast, go to Google and type Viewbug Photofocus $10,000 photo contest and enter that puppy, because there's no entry fees, and you have a chance to win $10,000 or more, actually, worth of photo related stuff. And you can also do all kinds of cool photo contests. And Viewbug is either already rolled out or in the process of rolling out. I hope I'm not giving away anything here, but I'm going to tell you because I know about it. You might just have to keep it between us here on Photo Focus in the audience, but they're going to roll out the ability for people to create their own contests. So there's all kinds of cool stuff at Viewbug. Go to viewbug.com for more information. For any of these sites, you can find their banners at photofocus.com, which, by the way, is updated 365 days a year, 7 days a week, has always been free, always will be as long as I'm involved.
Very cool. Well, to wrap out today's show, I just want to talk about some favorite gadgets or gear that's there. We had mentioned the Olympus camera. Both you and I had a chance to play with that, Scott. But let's just each share a couple of fun gizmos, gadgets, both post and production. I just wanted to throw one out there, which is I'm finding myself doing a lot of photo work on either my iPhone or the iPad, just because the camera's there. I'm taking out some fun shots, and I've been using two tools a lot. One has been the Snapseed product from the folks over at Nick, and I must say I really like this. It's got the same sort of point technology that they do. And the other is that I've been playing with some of the filter packs from Tiffin. They've translated a lot of their digital packs into an iPhone app or the ability to open up your images on your iPad and do the same thing. And I must say, I'm really impressed with what I can do on my phone or a tablet. That there's just times, and it's funny, right? Because you take the phone out, you take the picture, and there's all these things in your mind like, I wish I could do this or this or this, or when I get to Photoshop, and it's like, no, wait, I could bring this vision to life right now. And before I post this image to photo sharing, sometimes you see things and you want to just share the picture right there. It's the beautiful sunset. You want to get it out, or it's just a fun moment and you want to share it with friends and family. But I think a lot of folks, because these smartphones haven't had the technology built in, have just sort of settled for what they were getting in camera. And between these two tool sets, which actually are available for Droid too, I believe now, I'm really liking what I'm doing. Any fun things you guys have played with, software or hardware gear that you think people should get if they have a couple of dollars burning a hole in their pocket they can wisely spend?
I'm trying to think. I do love gadgets. I'm kind of a gadget guy. I've got my iPhones and my iPads, and by the way, I still have my first iPad, not number 2 or number 3. I'm still using my first one. But I'll tell you the one thing that I love lenses, because lenses help me create and they help me do stuff. And there's some great lenses that have come out. I was talking about the 18-200, but a great lens for people who are shooting full frame, and there's a lot of people are actually moving to full frame. They're discovering that some full frame cameras are being more available. I think Nikon's getting ready to come out with a D600 maybe. That'll be a little bit more in line with the consumer level. But the what is it, the 28-300? I think that's what it is, which is basically the sister lens to the 18-200, is a great lens. It's a great travel lens for photographers who want to not carry a bunch of gear around. And I do PhotoWalks and things like that, so I'm really about minimizing my gear and maximizing what I can do. So if nobody's tried out the 18-200 or the other full frame alternative, I think that's something that they should really look into investing into, because it just gives you a lot. It's just like carrying around that small camera, that micro four thirds or whatever. I think a travel lens like you were talking about, Rich. It's a great travel lens. Look at something like that. Go and go to the sponsor and rent one. That's the best way to find out if you like it. But let me tell you what, I mean, it's a great all around lens. And once you use one, you'll find it stays on your camera more and more. So that's kind of my little thing that I would advise. And that's what I advise my friends. I say, buy the lens that you're going to use most of the time.
Okay. How about you, Scott? Any gadgets or gizmos or cameras that you've played with that you really like?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about the OMD because it's a big step up for Olympus. This camera's so hot you can't even dream about getting one, so I don't even know why I'm bothering to mention it because it's on back order till 2000 forever.
They sent me one to do a review on, and then they literally called me every single day. Could you send it to the next person? I'm like, oh, I'm not done with it yet. Could you please send it to the next person? Oh, I'm still doing my review. We need you to send it to the next person. Okay. And then I held on to it for another 3 days because I love this camera so much.
Yeah, I won't be sending this one anywhere. I got mine, but I'll tell you, it is an amazing piece of tech. Now, not perfect, and I'm doing a full review over at Imaging Resource. By the way, not Photofocus. The full review will be published at Imaging Resource. I've started writing for them too. And all I'll say about this is, ready? 9 frames per second in a micro four thirds camera. 9 frames per second.
Yeah, with great RAW, and the in-camera HDR was really, really good control. I was just so impressed with how well this camera behaved. I tried it in tough shooting situations, and I was like, no, a camera this small doesn't do these things. These are not features that you get.
Well, last year we had Photofocus named the EP3 the camera of the year. And this is a step up from that. And if you were to add the VF2 or VF3 Olympus standalone electronic viewfinder to the Olympus, because I'm with Jeff, I'm not shooting any camera that doesn't have some kind of viewfinder. I can't look at the back of the screen and take pictures with the camera 6 inches away from my face. That's like the most unstable way to take a picture I can think of. But if you were to add the add-on viewfinder to the EP3, it's the same price as the OMD. And now, but you're not getting near the camera. The OMD has got a magnesium alloy body. It's weatherproof as any Nikon or Canon. Let me say that again. It's as weatherproof as any Nikon or Canon. It's got a rotating OLED viewfinder, which is better than most LCDs. It's got every manual control you can think of, and they even have a battery pack for it. This camera is not a toy.
Oh, the battery grip is awesome, and it actually could break apart. You could have it so you can,
just use the grip part or the battery part. I have a full review coming, but I'm telling you right now, my EP3s are for sale, so that should give you the hint.
Actually, this is really nice. I'm actually just kind of looking at the camera right now, looking at their website, and they've got a really great website that talks about the whole camera. And I mean, if people don't like the look of the standard micro four thirds with the pancake lens and stuff, this actually has the look of a standard DSLR camera.
Well, now I'll tell you exactly what it looks like because I owned one. I'm old enough to have owned an OM1-MD, which stands for motor drive. The first 35 millimeter camera with an automated motor drive capability. Not Nikon, it was Olympus. And go ahead and send me hate mail and dig around and try to prove me wrong. I don't care because this is a fact. I was there. And this thing was tiny, and this I was shocked that when I pulled it out of the box, all these memories flooded back into my brain of the OM1. And this is modeled on that. Olympus has always made their bones on having smaller, lighter weight cameras. That's always been their niche.
And, and they have great optics too.
Oh, and I'm telling you again, I own. Okay, so on the Canon side, I've got the 50-1.2. I've got the 85-1.2. On the Nikon side, I got the 85-1.4. I've got all the 70-200 2.8s and all the latest versions. The 24-70s. I got all that kind of cool stuff. But none of those lenses is any sharper than the 12 f2 or the 45 f1.8 from Olympus. None of those lenses is sharper than those two lenses. They all weigh more and cost more, though. So I would take a long look at the OMD. Now, the fact of the matter is we're still talking about a tiny sensor here. So those of you who are of the religion of low light, ignore this entire conversation.
I did shoot with it at night though, and it did behave respectably. And
It did,
because it shoots RAW, and RAW's gotten so good at removing noise, there is this thing called post-production.
but Rich, for those who are of the cloth, of the religion of the low light, who maybe in their entire lives will never actually take a picture at night, but buy all their cameras based on low light performance,
Yeah.
this will not be good enough.
I actually have to, you know what, that is so funny to say it because, I'm working with the D800 because I'm doing a book on it right now. And the one comment that people have for me is like, well, I heard the low light performance isn't as good as like, maybe the 5D Mark III or maybe the D4. And I'm like, okay, how many pictures do you take in the dark? I mean, seriously, how many times do you take your camera out in a position where you're going to be shooting at 12,800 ISO? I mean, most of the pictures I want to take are in much better light. So,
I by the way, Jeff, to answer your question, in 37 and a half years of professional photography, I've taken exactly 0 pictures at that ISO, or 0 pictures at that ISO, or higher ISOs. I've taken exactly 0.
yeah, I have no desire to shoot at that high of an ISO, so I don't care how the camera performs at the high ISO range. At the super high ISOs. I like the fact that they shoot. That now you have the flexibility of 3200 ISO. I mean, to me, that's really great. If you can get that and get a decent photograph, you've opened up a lot of different areas of photography for yourself that's shooting in slightly lower light. But let's face it, most people like to shoot when the lights are on. I mean, that's just
me. I like to bring an 8-foot Chimera softbox with me, full of light, and then I don't have to worry about it. That light is, by the way, available to me at any time I want it. Therefore, it is available light.
Yes, exactly. And along with the portable generator and the 3 people to carry it. And
no. That just, you can find alternating current just about anywhere in the United States, my friend. And all you need is an extension cord, and this puppy will work.
All right. Well, I think I think that gives folks a lot of good things to think about. We covered a lot of ground in today's episode. Let's start with you, Jeff. If people want to keep in touch, I know you're on Google Plus. You've got some training titles out there over at Kelby Training. You've got some books. Where are some places that people can go to find out about you, and what's some of the latest training you've released?
Actually, most of my work now has been concentrated on books, just because there's been a lot of things coming out lately. So I've done my last book that came out was on Lightroom, for any of you who are actually moving into Lightroom. I have a book to release that covers Lightroom 3 and Lightroom 4, so it's kind of covers both, and depending on what you're going to buy. I'm working on a book for the D800. I haven't really announced this, but it's kind of official. I'm going to be doing one on the T4i when it comes out. So if they want to find out more about me, they can go to my website, which is www.photowalkpro.com. And if they're looking for the books, they can go to barnesandnoble.com, amazon.com, and they're all there along with yours, Rich.
Yep. And actually, for those that are listening on the day that this is released, over at Peach Pit, they've got a special through the 4th of July period into the weekend after. And they have 50% off most ebooks, including yours and mine. So if you're looking to stock up on a couple of books, they actually have a good special going. Scott, where can people find you?
Well, as the only person on this podcast that Peach Pit didn't deem good enough to be their author, I write for a company a little bit different. It's Random House, the largest publisher in the world, and my book, Going Pro, is available on Amazon.com and in fine bookstores everywhere. Also, you can find me over at Photofocus.com and on the Twitter, Scott Bourne, SCOTTBOURNE, where I happen to hang out every day.
And Jeff, you're mostly on Google Plus these days, right?
Mostly Google Plus. I still, I pay attention to my Twitter feed, PhotoWalk Pro, and also Facebook, but most of my stuff is all Google Plus.
Okay. And you can find me on social media under Red Pixel, RHEDPIXEL. I've been trying to get better at being more active on the Google Plus side and interacting with people there, but I am very active on both Facebook and Twitter, so feel free to connect. Also, for those of you who've been sending in comments about the show, it'd be great to get some of you to post a review over at iTunes, and we really appreciate the feedback so far. We've tried to roll some of that into these episodes. So thanks again for joining us for this week's episode. We'll be back in 10 more days with some new stuff. And I'd just like to say thanks to Jeff and Scott for joining this week.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, guys. Happy holidays to you.